Hello, this is Lisa Lee, and I am jumping right in. We're going to do a reading on this upcoming war. I don't know why I haven't done this kind of thing before. I do, actually. You never really want to do a reading in foresight because it's like being a weather forecaster when I'm talking about like global events, right? It's like being a weather forecaster looking at the screen and seeing the shape of the storm and the relative like color of the storm, but not really knowing what the storm looks like until you're in it from below looking up, and then you see everything. And so it's like, it's actually best to do readings like this where you want to look at the landscape of something that you're going to have to encounter, or that's going to be like it's a moment in history. We want to do it from on the ground floor, from right within it. And so that's what we're going to do. Those of you that are here that aren't like believers, you don't have to be a believer. This is actually an exercise in community gathering, meditating, thinking, listening, communicating. It's like a point, like think about like the town square and the soapboxes and the people preaching. From a spiritual standpoint, what it means for an oracle to look at a world event or a local event, and for all of us to come together. It's not, and I can hear my voice going a little bit. It should be belief-based, so I encourage the belief-based to be here with your faith that belief is permission, but you don't have to believe, like to sit here, to engage with this. You just have to think about, well, whether or not it interests you, right? And so, give me one moment. I'm going to take the occasional break to take a very loud sip of water, because talking a lot makes my throat go dry, and I had one of those, like, giant cups. The poet. So, okay, let's get into this the right way. Those of you that are spiritual, I want you to know that you're a part of this, and that your intuition and that your guides and your assets as gods are here to influence what comes through, because you're here. And so this is a gift to you. And so if you want to enter in prayer with me, I'm going to enter in prayer. Those of you that don't want to enter in prayer, that's okay too. You can just sit back, relax, and think. So I evoke the Morrigan within me, my ancestral goddess. The Morrigan, the title within me, I invoke your wisdom, your war wisdom, your insight, your beauty in knowing. And I ask that you go with us into this dark landscape, and that you show us what it is that we need to see. And I ask for those other goddesses of wisdom and war to bring forth the light and allow us to forge a path forward. And so with that, let's take a look. All right. So I'm going to start shuffling, and I'm just I'm going to be in ambling conversation with you a little bit. This is kind of how I enter pick up a channel. It's like a trance meditation for me, and I'm going to amble until I'm able to sort of catch the current, and then I'm going to go right in. So the first thing that we're going to do, we're going to address some like right off the bat questions about like what path are we on if nothing changes, what unseen force or actor has the most influence over the unfolding future, and what pivotal event or choice will define the next stage of the war. Those are like the first three that we're just going to cover off the bat. Before we do that, I'm going to take a sip of water. And I'm going to ask that you take some deep breaths into your body. One of the first things that we have to learn as a people, and I think this is really important, and it comes from my ancestors teaching me, is that we have a responsibility in relationship to where the war is taking place, where the crisis is currently located. That if we can see where the crisis is, and we're not in the crisis, because we're in a different time right now. We're in a time where we're all connected. And so we have to do boots on the ground work with our own nervous systems in relationship to where we are, like in proximity to crisis. So if you are at a safe distance from the crisis, I want you to take a deep breath. It is your responsibility to stay calm for those who cannot right now. When there is a crisis on the ground, and you know that there are people who cannot, in their right mind, stay calm, stay focused, in any way make decisions based on anything other than like this moment of survival to the next moment of survival to the next moment of survival. What we do in support of that is not join in the terror and the screaming and the helplessness. That is not the helpful thing to do. The helpful thing to do is to look at where you're located. You're gonna take stock, and you're going to take responsibility. In that first line, that first march into battle is going to be to regulate your nervous system. Learning how to do this is going to be necessary. I'm going to have another sip of water. There are some tricks to the trade. If you feel like you're going to have a hard time doing that, like on command, it is worth stopping, going to YouTube and looking and seeing where, oh my God, my throat chakra is under such siege. Going and looking and seeing where you can get that information, taking a few moments and regulating your nervous system. Another thing that we can do usually is like a meditation before the reading. I do like to do those. And so let's do a very short one. Take a deep breath into your body. I want you to see the spine of your body as a tree, and I want you to see that tree as having branches into all of the rest of your body, and I want you to take a deep breath into the spine of that tree, allowing that breath go into all the roots and all the branches. And then when you exhale, I want you to exhale, letting the wind pick up anything that is heavy that you are holding, and exhale into that wind and allow that heaviness to lift. Do that a couple more times. I have to drink more water. My throat chakra is fighting me. I don't even know why that would be. I'm just going to pray for the assistance of my ancestors now in terms of my voice. The High Priestess is normally silent and has been for a very long time. And so it's not at all surprising that like the powers that be, and when I say powers that be, I'm not talking about like good and evil in the traditional sense. I'm talking about the ecosystem of the earth that we are in and the ecosystem of consciousness that we are part of, and how we influence it with our moods and our perspectives and our sense of our own power. Which is why I say, from a spiritual perspective, when there's a war going on, you should have your nervous system in check, and you shouldn't be joining the nervous system that needs the regulation of what your prayer can do, of what your participation can do, of what your communication can do, of what your organizing can do, of what your mitigating can do. And so as we enter this, I want us to enter on the right foot in support, which is to come from a place of calm. We're not coming from a place of fear. That doesn't mean there's nothing to fear. It means that we see where we are in proximity to danger, and we act accordingly. And so the first question that we are asking here, and this is us with the High Priestess, we're going to start to communicate. There's like this is going to go very quickly. So the first thing that you need to know about whatever this moment in time is that this is going to move quickly. Nice. So with the Queen of Swords on the bottom upright, the Queen of Swords coming under, oh gosh, I just saw what that was. So I was doing these readings when Trump was elected, and I kept on seeing the Queen of Wands show up, and I was like, what is the deal with the Queen of Wands? Like, why is she here? Because I was like, is going to be an impeachment? Like, I couldn't see it very clearly. It's looking like we might have a little bit of a silver lining with this in regard to this. This is the Queen of Swords, but I saw it as the Queen of Wands. And so it flashed into my mind as like related to those readings in the beginning when Trump was elected, where a woman stepped forward, and I was like, I don't know what that means. And so I do think that we have this moment in time where there's communication back and forth, and there's something about communication. All right. Let's get ready to rumble. We're calm. We're calm. Let love transform, and celestial rose of Ma. And on the bottom of the deck, we have the Sacred Phoenix Heart. Now, those of you who have the Rumi deck, I lost the book. It's somewhere in my house. It's always fun with these readings to look up the meanings in the oracle books when you have them, to see how they align with the message as well. Like, that's a good... that's a little like exercise that you can do for your own intuition and your own confirmation as well. So what we're looking at here in terms of like what path are we currently on if nothing changes, like we're looking at love, let love transform. And so the first thing that we have to notice from a spiritual, point of view, and like when we're doing, what's going on here? Okay, King of Cups. I have to, is also spaz work, I have to say. We have the King of Cups here, and that's not an accident. So, especially with the Aries. Okay, we're going to be talking about wars in a little bit, just like more generally. And so let love transform. Like one of the first, what the hell is going on? This must have gotten mixed in from like a previous cleanup, and I did not see it in my pre-shuffle. All right, I think everything's for a reason. Yes, well, why not, right? All right. Don't think anything of it. This is if you follow me long enough, you know just how spastic I am. But I don't think that this exact thing has happened before. So we're gonna put this over here, and we're just gonna like mind its business if it comes up in the way that you know it you know whatever. This is, you'll see how this works in a minute. So with the let love transform, you know, we are looking at a situation where we have a need for a lot of things to transform. We have a moment in time. We're all in collective agreement on we're done with wars. We don't want to do wars. We're not doing wars. We're not doing wars like this. We're not bullying each other. We're not bullying other nations. Like the bullying is done. So why then are we having conflicts at the level of civil war in the United States, conflicts at this level, and a sort of end times, like, you know, fan fiction wish list with the Middle East? Like, why are we looking at that? Why are we even in this? How can we as a people be so sure about the insanity of an incoherence of war, and also see it that on a boots on the ground level in our communities, we have wars and skirmishes even between classes. You know, the poorest, the homeless, you know, and those who are just one rung above and one rung above that and one rung above that. We have problems all the way down in terms of like the wars that exist even like just interpersonally with each other. And so when we enter into this and we look at let love transform, like this message is about, you know, what path are we currently on if nothing changes? And the group that is in front of us is the group that the goddess is addressing. And so for us, how does this war impact us? And that doesn't mean that we're not looking at the impact further, but we're going to contract and expand as we do this. And so let love transform. You know, the first thing that we have to look about is like, how are we going to respond to this? You know, like how do we, with the challenge here and the Voyager on the journey that we're on as people, like what power do we individually have to respond to this in a way that will impact, that can impact how this plays out, and what can we expect from what is the story structure on the board is separate from our potential influence in the way that we react to the information. And so the story structure on the board is that something will have to transform, that it's going to have to transform because we say it has to transform, that it has to transform because it is unsustainable. It's unsustainable interpersonally, it's unsustainable financially, it's unsustainable in terms of the coherence of the health of the planet. And so that we have been saying and diagnosing and saying and diagnosing, but falling under the tyranny of war gods, because that's what I'm going to call them. That's what I'm seeing this very clearly, that nothing has changed. From the time of the rise of the war god, the kingdom head, who sent out young people to go and die and sacrifice their lives for their purpose. Oh my gosh, my throat wants to fight with me. Doing oracle work is so fucked up sometimes, especially in an environment that is opposed to it. Because it's a body, it's physical mediumship, it's the level of body. And that's a whole lesson in and of itself. Because I'll explain that another time. But basically what I want to get back into the channel. Nothing has changed in terms of like this structure. Patriarchy. We live under a structure where somebody in charge puts other people to war. Somebody in charge put other people to slavery. And the hierarchical structure is that the person who has the most resources is in charge of the war and the slavery, and everybody else that has a loss of autonomy, has a loss of personal power, has a loss of their own potential. Basically, their creative capacity on this earth is siphoned into a machine. So what path are we currently on if nothing changes? It's a path that says that love has to transform the situation. It's not we stay on a path where nothing changes, like change. So first thing we do is we no longer endlessly diagnose. We accept the necessity of change. And something about this war is pushing us closer to that. And so while we have this silver lining here with the Queen of Swords, and I think we might be getting out of the current risk to like hostile takeover and fascism that we are currently under, and it's not at the cost of these lives. It just seems to be correlated. And so, but beyond that, like in terms of let love transform, then we step into our responsibility with being able to identify from a place of a calm nervous system in respect to where we are positioned on this earth, a problem that needs solving. Now, when I saw that everything that has happened before will happen again, like I see that all the time. And when I think about like, you know, just what it means to be in a situation where there's wars, why are there wars? Because our worldview allows it. As a global community, our worldview is permissive. Worldview is what we all agree on. What do we all agree on? You have to go to work. We don't really all agree on that, but we agree on it enough that it's a worldview, that it's a God that we all have to serve because everyone is in consensus. When everyone is in consensus, for better or for worse, we create a God. And so for a very long time, the God has said, we have to have war. And everyone has said, like, I guess that means that like young Timmy has to go off into the sailboat at age 12 and die somewhere, 5 years from now, coming back with no eye and like half of a leg. And it's just like, this is the cost of life, this is just the daily business, right? And so there will be success and benefit from North Node as if it or they came from all there is, the philosophies and laws involved, do it in a big way in the 9th house. So at the level of change, what we really need to be focusing on from a calm nervous system and a perspective of consensus building is really looking at the worldview, pulling apart that worldview, not doing our religion against your religion, our enlightenment against your ignorance, but rather how can we take a different view? Okay, so why am I going on that tangent? Like, why did that even happen? Because I saw this thing with the Roman Empire, and I was seeing it while I was getting ready to do this reading. I was in the shower. I was like, okay, I'm going to do this today. And I saw the Roman Empire, and I think that's what this King of Cups and this Aries is all about. I saw the Roman Empire, and I saw, it was like a vision where I just saw like endless people, like a period of time after period of time after period of time. I just saw these troops and troops and troops and troops, and they were just walking off of a cliff into a void, walking off a cliff into a void, walking off a cliff into a void. And that was a scary sort of vision. But when it comes to something like the necessity of war, well, we have to have it, because if we can't, like, what are we going to do? This war brings this into question. It's not just this war, it also includes all of the Middle East, and it includes the West. And so I want to see timeline, though. I don't want to go too crazy with I like the forecast part of the readings. I like the big pictures. And I am getting a lot of attack with my voice. Think about that, though. When something can't be said, think about all the things that can't be said. Think about like the number one agenda and strategy about everything that you are socially engineered to believe is true. Number one thing is that there is no other side. There is no supernatural realm. And those that can believe it in these parameters, in agreement with our war doctrine, with our worldview. And so when that is the dominant message, you know that it's also the dominant persuasion. It's also the dominant propaganda. And so when we come against that with the warrior, and we bring in this notion of the warrior spirit, and we look at the mirror here as well, another reason why I think it's important for us to be able to locate the war where the war is and appropriately respond. That means take action. But take action in proportion to where you are positioned, where God or Goddess has placed you in purpose to what you can and cannot do to bring the change that is needed for everyone. Something unsustainable has to change. Something that has to change, everybody takes part in participating in what bringing that change means. We do that in conversation. That's the starting point. But take it seriously. So the first thing that the gods want us to know, that the Morrigan wants us to know, is take it seriously. How are we going to respond to this war? We're going to take it seriously. How are you going to take it seriously? You're going to look at where you're sitting. If fear overtakes you at every insight of what actually is in the world operating as the force of evil, and that fear debilitates you, that's when you have to employ the magic and the alchemy of anger. Because if you are safe in your home right now, and you are 5 countries over, and you know that there are people being bombed and that they have no ability to regulate their there is just chaos, and they are just, it becomes pure animal at the level of survival. And so when you're not pure animal at the level of survival, every rung up, there is a responsibility commensurate to what you can reach and what you can hold. And that can mean very little, or that can mean a lot, depending on who you are, what resources you have. So not everyone is commanded to get on their marching boots and go out in the same way to defeat the evil forces. Everyone is commanded in their own particular way. And so we start that by having conversations about what we accept and what we don't accept, who we align with and who we don't align with, and what it means to calmly weather the disagreements. Because we can't act like those who are throwing bombs at each other, because that's where this can't escalate to. At no point can we say we have to fight like they're fighting, the way that they're fighting. The only strategy when you have a war god in a war god's world is to build a worldview that disqualifies the war. And that's something that our creativity and our agreement and what we come together in agreement, we are completely capable of. And so this is not good. When we get when we get an answer from the gods to the question, what path are we currently on if nothing changes? And the gods say, you have to change. And you have to take change seriously. That's the first information that we're getting with the big question of what are we doing? And they're saying, we're not even going to discuss where you're going. If you don't change, you're going to change. On to the celestial rules of Ma. Let me just get some more water. Let's bullet point that. Step 1, we agree to change. What does that change look like? We don't need to agree beyond that. We have 1 point of agreement. We are going to change how we see this and how we participate with what it is, so that we can try to look to another outcome, so that we can try to find victory in another way. We have tried revolution. We've gone many rounds trying to disqualify the power of the tyrants. We're going to have to take a different route. And I think that that's the celestial rules of Ma, because let love transform tells us a little bit about what this route might look like. There is a challenge to this next leg of the journey in the human race as people. And it's going to require a lot of communication. It's going to go fast. There's new leadership coming through. That's like a nice little thing too. But with the Aries being this, and this Aries and the King of Cups, this is a bad combination together. I'll tell you why in a second. Let's just get some other cards. This is overall, and I don't want to say this with any invalidating. Oh my God. I'm going to have to fight this message out. It's been a long time since I do that. I don't want to say that with any invalidating of any loss of life or any loss whatsoever. All loss is avoidable. And so it's always avoidable. But it looks like this loss does like bring a new world. And I don't want to, again, I don't want to say that that's like the way that we want to do it. But if we look at the path we are currently on, if nothing changes, the gods are saying something has to change. That's it. And now we're like, okay, well, what does that change look like? Well, the pivot point that we see and that we're in right now in the way of these end times players, because that's what they are. They're playing out a war that they have manifested through the belief systems, and that not all of them. Some of them are not in this Abrahamic feud, but others are, right? And so when we think about what will come of this end of this time, that is something I want you to just stop at for a moment, because, you know, we can argue with manifestations of huge conglomerates of magic practitioners in the way of religious leaders, okay? And we do have to understand that the spirit realm, and this came through a reading that I just did for my Patreon, I have one. But there is this aspect of the spirit realm as being sort of like an adaptogenic there's a class of like vitamins that's an adaptogen. Adaptogenic is not a word, adaptogen. But the spirit realm operates like an adaptogen often, in the way that you do match the place that you are in maturity, like in a lot of ways, with the energies that you call in or that you interact with. And that maturing process happens in consort. It's actually an evolution process. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It can be. But what we're looking at here in terms of this transformation, this potential for transformation with this end time war. It is an end time war. It's not our end. It's an end to the Roman Empire. It's an end to patriarchy, and it's an end to that particular worldview. And in my spiritual sight, a worldview is a god. It's an end to that particular god. It has been forecast for that god to end in this way. And so like that's the thing that we're looking at with this war. Somebody manifested it real hard, over a long period of time. And we're not saying that those, and sometimes I'll nervous laugh when I am channeling, because it's just like, whoa. But those that are lost in these battles are that can be avoided. That should have been avoided. We take responsibility. At the end of this, we have to look at what caused it and what we need to do to heal it. And it will require healing, not fixing, and that's a different process. But let's look at so with that sacred phoenix heart, like there's a rise. There's a rise of a new worldview. There's a rise of a new way of looking at things. There's a rise. And that celestial rose of Ma'at I do see this as being blood. And I do see this as the blood sacrifice that is demanded of a war god. At a certain point, the end of that reign of terror, there is a let love transform this. And I think that if we can ask about wiggle room, and we'll ask about wiggle room and mitigation of damages in a moment, but I want to just see a little bit more in terms of what does this conflict lead? What does this conflict lead to if no intervention? If there's no intervention that is spiritual. Okay, so this notion of spiritual intervention is coming in. Spiritual intervention is real. Spiritual intervention is real. If you're secular, you can look at it as like the protests and the numbers of people coming together in agreement on a material realm have an influence and an impact on those in leadership looking at their numbers, right? So if you can see it in the material world, it's not hard to like lend it to the spiritual realm as being, when you come into agreement in prayer, in conversation, in consciousness, in coherence, you create an impact on the whole. And so that spiritual intervention, look at where you're at, look at what you're dealing with, begin to sort of draw a sense of what you are capable of. If you are far away and you have a toddler, what you can reach and what you can hold is probably to just pray. But that prayer is in no way that's a very powerful tool. That's a very powerful energy. If you work around people and you have the opportunity to teach, you can inform, you can bring insight at the level of connection, at the level of where you can reach and touch. Grandstanding and performing for each other in social media echo chambers is something that we have to step away from. We can hot take it, all the way, but we really do need to work on what it means to connect, because connection is where we bring healing, and there's not healing otherwise. And so this 20, broaden your horizons at the level of hearth, at the level of your home, at the level of what you can reach, at the level of home. Broaden those horizons. With the house of love, you shall be loved on the bottom of the deck. So we have let love transform, and you shall be loved, and house of love. And so the first thing that we look at with this is that there is a cataclysmic battle at play, that it seems like it's going to go quickly, and that we're going to get saved by the day by some divine, there's a feminine energy here coming through. With this Aries and the King of Cups, let's talk a little bit about why this is not a balance that I like. The King of Cups is, I always say, I kind of have the same phrase that I use all the time with the King of Cups, because it's like the quickest to the feeling, to the vibration. The King of Cups is going to be your person who has the emotional intelligence all the way to the bottom of the ocean. They have emotions and feelings and motion and feeling, and all the ways in which the feeling state operates. They have it mapped out at the the mental, cognitive level. They feel it as they're mapping it. They are all the way at the bottom of the ocean in the most excruciating pain with their pen and their paper, you know, making sure that it's annotated and noted that like this is what it feels like when, how. They understand how like that current affects that current with that alchemy. It's a very intelligent, very deep energy. But at its worst, the King of Cups is alone. And the King of Cups has no influences. And so everything that the King of Cups is doing and experiencing, it suffers at the level of not emotional intelligence, but emotional maturity. Because we mature emotionally when we are given opportunities to do so with others, in community, in groups. That's something that like is, you know, we might not need schools to teach us math and science and reading with AI, but we will need schools to teach us how to connect with each other. Because this is the most important work that we can do. And it's also the boon to our success. It's also our innovation. You know, and so the King of Cups, though, becomes a problem because the King of Cups can tell you everything and can diagnose the entire problem, but doesn't know how to reach the people that need the help, that need to have the conversation, that need to be brought into that healing process, that need to be integrated into the solution, that are the solution, essentially. What is the solution? What good is the solution to the problems of the sicknesses and the ills of the world if the people who need the medicine the most aren't getting them? If the medicine is all theoretical and philosophical, but it's not reaching the sickness, we have a problem. So the good thing about this with Neptune and Aries, because that's what just popped out in my head, and we have Aries and Neptune together somehow, is, I don't know, I have to look. but this whole notion with the radical and the King of Cups, I don't like it because at its worst, it is somebody who has a lot of power and understands a lot, but has no relationship to the world and is completely disconnected from the people and making decisions like an idiot. And so we do see that as being the problem here, this disconnect from power and access and vision. And like, that's not a good thing. And it's emotional, and I don't know why. And we don't have to diagnose that. I just know that the Aries energy here is one where there is impulse to act, and the impulse to act is based on the confidence that this energy has in their what they believe is their emotional intelligence, but their disconnect from the people is so great that it's actually only their emotional intelligence about their emotions, and that is a very shallow pond. And so we do have a problem with this misaligned leader, you know, and the mirror here though is here for us to say like, okay, where are we with that? Like, because I know that what might save us here with this feminine energy coming in after this, there's a lot of action. It's very quick. There's a lot of communication back and forth, and then there's something here in the way of like a female like taking control, or having control, or getting a voice somehow. With the mirror here, and we got to look at ourselves. You know, we can look at Trump and we can say like, this is somebody who's shallow waters, and their confidence in their vision of all the things that can be felt and heard. You know, we can see that in the patriarchy all the time. You know, why is she so like upset? Like, obviously it's nothing. That's like a really good example of like, you have shallow water. Your depth of field is fucked. You might have a good survey on yourself, but without those opportunities for maturation in groups with others, especially groups outside your comfort zone, especially groups outside your language, especially groups outside your culture. Without that fluency back and forth, the maturation and the ability to see is like very, very much hampered. And so then we make decisions from this point of ultimate confidence. That mirror is there because the gods are saying like, yes, this is true in the extreme when somebody is so disconnected that we can look at it and be like, that is terrifying. I saw like what is that story? Oh my gosh. I don't know. I see this weird 90s movie. It's like, it's about the dumb leadership. I don't know. I can't get it, but it's. There are times when my guides will give me things I just don't know the name of. Some movie about like really like the dumbest, like de-evolution, the opposite of evolution. you know, we can kind of see where disconnect and a lack of diversity and a lack of communication and a lack of the innovation that comes with those conflicts, which brings strength. Conflict brings strength. War is not that. War is not that. And so what we're looking at here is we are seeing an end to a worldview, and that's a silver lining. We're seeing the rise of what it looks like a female leader. We're seeing this go somewhat quickly, but there's blood. All right, and the warrior here does speak to a participation by all of us. The challenge here is like there's a challenge here in terms of like everybody is not on the same page. And we know that everybody's not on the same page. And so why can't we move quickly into a new worldview? Why can't we get on the consensus of like saving the world from war and saving the world from planet catastrophe? Well, it has a lot to do with the fact that like we have been diagnosing, and we're diagnosing in the same way that somebody in another shallow pond is diagnosing, and they feel confident and we feel confident. We feel confident because of things like numbers and reading. That doesn't make a difference when we're looking at the energetic landscape, because where we have to bring it all the way back is where are you in the mirror with what it means to be able to see where you are in the crisis, and know that your greatest reach and what you can reach and what you hold is by way of communication at the ground level in relationship to those who you're nearest. Now that's really difficult. I live in a red state, in a red dot, in a red state, and I'm running for my life. Like I'm not staying. But I sit here at this reading as Lisa Lee, just kind of bringing myself into this conversation and saying that what needs to be happening here at a global level by peoples who can look around and want to step into a new worldview of peace, of fairness, of no dictators, of no extractive, exploitive, earth destroying, person potential destroying economic systems. Like we have a groundswell of agreement. And what it means to put that into effect is to look in the mirror and see that we're not doing what the idiots are doing by having emotional intelligence all the way to the bottom of our pond and a great survey of the land that we can see, but no emotional maturity in relationship to bringing those depths into other places, other waters. Emotional intelligence at the level of the liberal mindset and emotional maturity at the level of connection are not clicking. We're not having success. So that's like the first place where the gods want to come in and say, like, do something about this. Warrior. Boom, boom. All right, let me get some more water. How are we holding up? I know this is a lot. I get that, like, when we're not doing psychic readings about, like, twin flame Kyle and, you know, daydream. I don't know. I'm not trying to, like, sometimes I get a little bitchy and I don't need to. So let's go over here and let's try to take this into, for the spiritual people, I'm going to take this into what unseen forces or actor has the most influence over the unfolding future. So let's look at that. So House of Love, you shall be loved, and Hearth, broaden your horizons. I want us to start thinking about, yes, we need change. How are we going to do it? We're going to get out of a tribal mindset. We're going to get out of tribal mindsets. We're going to pull ourselves out of tribal mindsets. Why? Because when you think about this war is the end of a world. It's the end of a worldview. It's not the end of our world. We're happily skipping and dancing into the new worldview, which has evolved. And because we're moving into the evolving and we're moving into the expansion of the whole, we're not trying to contract into the black hole of the past, right? We're trying to expand into a future. Like we're trying to move with the movement so that we don't have to be a part of the risk of the death process. We get to be a part of the life process. And so we're okay with the fact that change needs to happen, and we're happy with the birth of something new. And we know that the way to participate in this is to get out of the tribal mindset. It's a spell that is cast, and tribal mindset can be any kind of dogma at all. And that's where we can have we have the emotional and intelligence to the bottom of the pool that we're all in agreement. But with those that we don't agree with, we don't have the emotional maturity separate from the emotional intelligence to make that journey. We're challenged with that voyage to bring that connection. Like, but as human beings, like this is part of what it means to exist together, and because we have to, we kind of have to. And so let's take a look at what unseen force or actor has the most influence over the unfolding future. Let's do that now. I'm hearing, can you hear me? Tell me, can you hear me? So for every sacred phoenix heart that rises, it rises out of something that is like a I'm seeing like a confinement over the temple. I'm seeing the temple and the temple as being the spiritual center, as being the heart of the body of the whole. When we think about human consciousness as functioning as its own kind of universe in a sense. And that there have been all these structures, these horrible like wires and these cruel like metal things built into it and over the heart of the beating earth. And so that crystal rose maw, that blood, that bleeding heart, that rise of the sacred phoenix heart, we're seeing that there's a fire in the heart of the whole, of the mother. I call the earth the mother. There's a fire in the heart of the mother. And so what unseen forces or actor has the most influence over the unfolding events? The answer is there's a fire in the heart of the mother. And it's a sacred phoenix heart, which means that this fire is going to have to burn away all of these structures that are there to keep the heart from truly expressing and to keep her from, wow, let's take a look. All right, so who's in charge? Well, we are having, this is a pushback. The spiritual entity that is suppressed is not an ideology or belief. It is quite literally the mother's heart. It's the mother's heart in the mothers who don't want to send their children to war. It's the mother's heart in those of us who sit and we look at these children in war-torn areas and our mother's heart leaps up. It's the mother's heart in everyone who calls for an end to this carnage. It's the mother's heart who doesn't see the value or the purpose in somebody else's starving child and doesn't see the purpose in an economy that would facilitate that. The heart of the mother is what we're seeing, the flame. We're seeing an igniting under that. And we're seeing this call for the blood sacrifice. And so like once again, the war god says, I'm calling for blood sacrifice, and harmony is needed. And so with this miracle here and this harmony, there is some aspect of hope. And I see this hope in terms of like the words that are here, like that are used. You know, when the gods say, what do we have to do? Like, we have to change. Okay, we got the message. How do we have to change? We have to expand our sense of home, expand our sense of hearth, and get on the same page about what it means to step away from a tribal war reality and into a war that says, okay, we come from different places, we have different values. Each habitat produces a different like form of its creatures related to how it was mitigating and navigating and adapting to the environment. And therefore there is something beautiful about heritage and beautiful about culture and beautiful about what it means to like work with that. But that is very separate from like my house, your house, my boundary, your boundary. That tribal point of view, mine is not yours, yours is not mine, and now we have to fight over the resources. Like, we can't do that. And so there is some aspect of like, you know, bringing ourselves into a primal worldview is also doing so at the level of moving from economy into ecosystem. And so with this phoenix heart, like this mother's heart and this need for harmony and this miracle, there is something to be said about this conflict forcing and calling for a miracle. And so there might be some hope related to how much blood is really lost here and how much this call for blood sacrifice is heated. So let me get some more cards. I'm gonna try and see what pivotal event or choice will point. I have some questions here, I'm just trying to keep them. What pivotal event or choice point will define the next stage of the war? Good question. All right, warriors, let's put that there. Let's have some more water. So like, what's our activism? What's around you? Okay, if you're like me and you're a red dot in a red state and you don't want to talk to people who are violent, obviously, I understand. And the people who are in the red state and the red dots that feel like they're not violent. I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the neighbor that you know is violent. And we just can agree on that. We talk about how we're afraid. We talk about how being treated like this is scary. We don't lead with, I'm going to get you and I'm going to F you up because now we're playing with the war god's game. We lead with, it is not coherent for me to be afraid because I think of this and that, and this is not, you know, and it's reaching for the people that are hurting you. It's confronting people with your humanity, and that is vulnerability, and that is scary. But when it's actually, it offsets violence. And so there is this non-violent aspect to what it means to be a person who is of a belief that, oh gosh, this is so hard, because I'm looking at the rainbow and I'm thinking about a movement of people going to church whether or not someone agrees with their lifestyle or not, and just crashing the party and showing the love and showing the different way of perceiving and being, and still being able to meet, and still being able to praise, and still being able to sit there and and forcing someone to have the confrontation with their own heart that says, I'm going to have to ask this entire group that is tithing and into this community to leave because they don't agree with my belief system. Like it's taking war and it's transforming it, and that can be really hard when we think about minorities, because minorities don't have the power to do that. And so when we think about what it is to fight at the level where you can reach and hold, if you don't live in a place that is minorities, where you're a minority is what I meant. Like if you don't live in a place where you are a minority, then you are empowered to go into the most conservative church in your minority area and as a group and sit there and participate and have conversations and talk about faith and talk about God and talk about hurt and talk about, perspectives, not at the level of clicks and likes and views in those little tiny, extracted environments, but at the level of there's a group of 10 of us, we're all going to show up dressed in our Sunday best wigs, dresses, and we're going to go to church. The most influential spiritual advisor that I've ever experienced, I was 5 years old. It was at, what is that church? I was maybe 6 or so. I don't know. It's little. I was so little that I was really young. I'm trying to remember the name of the church. It was Pink Church in Long Island somewhere, that my mom was dating some guy from. And there was a trans person who was showing up and was told to leave. And so she protested. She sat in her car outside the entrance of the church while everyone was driving in, and she read her Bible. She had more of an influence on me than any pastor, any Christian had ever in the history of all spiritual influences. And the reason that is because I am psychic. I see things. And I saw the presence of God with her, and I saw the absence of God with the others. And if not for that example, I would not have been able to recognize the difference. And so I think that, when it comes to confronting people with our humanity, we do, for if you're in the crisis of the war and there's nothing but survival from minute to minute, and there's nothing but panicking, you have to panic. And so if you are not in that war, you have a responsibility to get angry and say, I'm not going to be unregulated. I'm not going to let this shut me down. I'm going to bring in all the faculties that I have available to me, because what it means for me to fight this is to take care of the part of me that is able to be strategic, that is able to information gather, that is able to work on what it means to develop that emotional intelligence that's also emotional maturity, and what it is to then bring myself into the place that I am and purpose to the communication that I have experienced through my life and expressing myself, and not where you're self-annihilating. If you're I'm not going to go do this, I'm in a red state and a red dot, I'm moving out, it's dangerous here. But that's what I mean by, if you're not in the crisis, I'm in the crisis. I'm in a red state during a civil war, and these people are violent. I'm not sticking my head out. If you're not, I did, and it was problematic. If you're not in the crisis, then you are at liberty to speak to the crisis. And you speak to the crisis with the mother's heart, and then we come into consensus about the big things that we agree on and we don't agree on, and we don't look at this war and we say, well, they have to stop it and they have to cut it out and they have to end their genocide, them, terrible them. We have to say this worldview that is permitting this is something that we're no longer going to participate in. We're stepping out of a tribal mindset, and we're going to take a look at what it means to go into a global agreement on things that we accept and things that we don't accept, from the position of a mother's heart and the heart for the Mother Earth. It's kind of a big ask, But I think that the gods, when we talk about like where we're at, what is this war? Well, if it's the end of an old worldview, then we have to get ready to take action on what it means to step into the new one. And that means stepping beyond the politics of identifying the problem, identifying the self, and identifying the pond, and deepening those, wells of depth and interaction and understanding outside of only any emotional intelligence that can help you communicate with somebody who is shallow. Because we need to bring them out of the fire and the house and the spell that has them under a worldview that would have them sending their children to death for a God that demands blood sacrifice, or the blood sacrifice of children in other lands. There's a spiritual responsibility here. The deadline surfer, we're going to talk about this. The impulse buyer and the hungry beast and the emoji overuser with the parallel Parker Pro. That's where, of course, like people kind of come to these readings. I always kind of complain to my guides and kind of complain to people who are sort of on the same page with me, that the oracle work, spiritual work, like this is not supposed to be fun and games and entertainment. Especially when you get a real message, like when you're sitting under an oracle or a psychic that is bringing through stuff that is broadly like for a group. It ends up having a preaching sort of tenor to it because that was technology that was stolen. Like all of the war gods, organized religions, are taking technology from older religions that were much more expansive, and it's and so when we think about what it is to actually be a spiritual practitioner, a mystic, one who practices the psychic arts, is to confront from within, to work roots up from the underworld into the light of day. And so with where we are in looking at, like our gods could come in and they could say, oh, they're going to bomb them and they're going to bomb them. And then like, this is going to be tragedy and this is the answer that we're going to get. And all that's going to do is cause fear and panic. And nobody wants to do that. And that's not how it's done. You don't get information without how to handle it. And if you're getting information without how to handle it, you're not, I don't know what that is. That's anybody can channel, which is why you see preachers with charisma, because charisma means you've caught a channel. But charisma doesn't indicate right or wrong. Charisma just indicates a strong channel. And you want to just watch what your information is when something is channeling in. And so, the answer to like our first sort of introduction on how do we handle this war, what does it mean to look at this war, what does it mean to work within, managing it ourselves, is we're going to get confronted on some of our own views and own behaviors, and we're also going to get confronted on the level of our own grandiosity in terms of what we can and cannot do, and know that what we can do is going to be effective, and what we can't do is make ourselves the center of somehow this attention. And so by addressing the problems and saying, this needs to change, number one, okay? We're going to say that. Now we're going to go away from the diagnosing and saying, who do I need to talk to about what it means to reach people with my agony over the mother's heart that is suffering? Like, what are we talking about? Politics? Because I want to talk to another mother about this scene right here. And you're a Christian, right? This is your belief. You voted for that someone. Can we just talk about this little girl that is under rubble, that is being taken out? Can we just talk about her? We're not going to talk about the politics. I want to see if we agree on that. Because if we agree on that, then we can maybe be friends. Because I think you don't agree on this with me. And maybe that's where the communication is breaking down. Because maybe you agree on this, but then you have a story about it that says it's necessary because your God demands blood sacrifice. So I want to know about the Jesus that demands blood sacrifice. Because I heard another version. If we're talking about politics, then we're playing their game. If we're talking about spirituality and religion, maybe we're not. If we're getting out of the tribal mindset of you're wrong, I'm right, and my people are better than your people, and your people need to be taken into pasture. You know what I mean? Because let's be honest with this mirror here. How many of you at this point in the war and in the struggle and in witnessing the horrors that are going on here in the United States with immigrants, how many of you just want to take those red hats and bring them out to pasture? But that's the same idea as the Israelis looking at the Palestinians and saying, it's not, you're not better for having that feeling or not having that feeling. You're better for having that feeling and do something different. because that feeling, it leads to ruin, and our gods are saying change. And so when we think about like the talking heads and what everybody's saying here, like, why is it getting to be the same repetitious, rapacious cesspool? Why does it not even feel good to engage anymore? Because we're not engaging at the level of emotional maturity. We're engaging at the level of emotional intelligence at the depth that we find ourselves, and my depth and your depth and their depth of field. This is going to be a fight that never ends. And so the first thing that we have to understand is that this is not working. I'm going to get some more cards. I'm going to go a little bit longer because I want to give you some instructions beyond just like, think about your content in terms of connection. Think about your content consuming in terms of connection. Do we literally run from the idiot? Yes, every single time you see the TikTok pop up, or you meet the person and they start to say the dumb thing, and goodbye, flick away. But that's not causing coherence within the whole. That's like getting a stronger divide, and to overcome the war god who is looking to end the world. A war god, how do you think a war god avoids its own death in a world that tires of war? It keeps the war going. If a war god does not want to be erased off the face of the earth, when war is no longer something that we use as humans in our own coherence as like evolved people, what is it going to do to keep itself alive? It's going to find two peoples, two tribes, and it's going to use those two tribes to fight each other forever. And those two tribes will be its sons. It will be its children. Think about it. I believe in. I'm a pantheist. I believe in gods, and I believe that God, the war god, is very smart to pit two sons together. The Abrahamic God, to pit two sons against each other. One because they were not the true heir hierarchy, and the other because they were born of grape. I mean, like, think about this war. Think about the symbolic significance here. When we start to talk about it at the level of spirituality, then we get underneath those roots that have a hold in us, that have us deadline surfing. I have to do this. I have to do that. I have to do this. I have to keep this up. I have to do this. I have to do that. Keep us out of the depth, and out of a deeper connection with the earth that says this is incoherent. These two sons fighting forever and ever and taking the earth and everybody down with them is incoherent. This is a page of wands. This is a lunatic. How can we now bring coherence into the whole? Well, that's going to be about connection with and finding ways to say, I may not be in the dangerous spot, so I'm in the communication hub. I'm not in the place of danger, I'm in the communication hub. If you are in the place of danger, how you communicate is from a place of no filter, no performance, because you are on the boots giving your report from a place of heart meets heart, depths meet depth. This is an authentic voice. This is not getting accepted or getting some kind of validation. You are where you are, it hurts. You speak from that pain. You communicate with those who aren't in pain about where they are, and they communicate with you about what needs to be done. And we communicate about where the problem is, and then we look at who's gatekeeping and participating and facilitating the ongoing problem. And then we talk to the people around them, and that's how we do it. And we don't, and I know it's not, it sounds like it's kind of impossible, but the miracle here has something to do with this moment in time where the blood sacrifice leads to this mother's heart that rises up in an anger that overcomes the fear. Because if you are afraid, if you are driven by fear, if you live in nothing but anxiety, if anxiety is all that is taking you anywhere, there is an alchemical antidote to that, and it's anger. It doesn't matter how scared you are, you get angry enough, that fear is going to evaporate. And that's how a lot of people become rage heads, okay? So you don't want to do it that way. You want to be able to have a relationship with your fear that doesn't necessitate anger as the only way for you to overcome it. But if you have a job interview and you have so much anxiety that you are crippled by it, but you want that job, that anger says, you know what, F this, I'm going to do this, I want to do this. You call on the anger. You call on the fiery goddesses of anger. You invoke that anger in order to get you where you're going. And that doesn't mean that the anxiety doesn't overwhelm you sometimes. That doesn't mean that sometimes the nervous system has more control than your greatest aspirations. Like, these are all things like in the mix. But if you want to understand just alchemically, when we're working with energy and magic and how we move through things, sometimes you need to call on the power of fire in the form of anger to overcome the power of like an electric storm. You set it on fire, and now you can move. And again, like if you do it right as a magician, you're not aiming that at somebody. You're just working with the alchemy within yourself. And the same goes for whatever what we're looking for in terms of a trajectory. What is the force behind it? The mother's rage, and overcoming the slavery with this Seven of Wands, the defense of the devil. The defense of the devil. What's this defense of the devil? The challenge here is the defense of the devil. What's the defense of the devil? Is we can never get too far into the way of progress if we're holding on to tribal points of view with this Nine of Wands. Every tribe on this planet, in the form of a region, very broadly speaking, is under a Nine of Wands breaking point, trying to uphold the tribe against the onslaught of other tribes' breakdowns. And so all of the migration, it's going to be a problem because the mother's heart is not taking it anymore. There is going to be weather. There are going to be storms that rise up and displace people. And now we have a problem with tribal issues. People can't go home because it's not safe. People can't be here because this is disrupting the ecosystem that currently, but now we have ecosystem issues. What is even an ecosystem issue? It's a way of talking about the things we have a hard time talking about. Because the problem with ecosystems and the problems with, we have to look at nature, and nature says to us, we can't have these borders. We have to have a rule for that we all agree on a worldview that says people are treated like this. Commerce operates in service of people, not in service of monsters. This is an ecosystem, so we're going to treat the world as an ecosystem. We're going to treat the earth like we're going to work into the ecosystem instead of working against the ecosystem. We're going to look at what ecosystems in different areas are, the value of ecosystem, like not having tribes, but having ecosystem. Like there's a whole way in which we can begin to have conversations with each other in uncomfortable territories that lead to our conflicts becoming our strengths. But the only way to alleviate the tension at the global level in each region is to decide on a worldview that is not about a competition that never ends and ends up with a war god pitting two sons against each other, the slave and the master. This is a Nine of Wands situation for everybody. So it has to be what do? We change. How do we change? We start talking to each other. How do we start talking to each other? I'm better than you. No. No, we figure out how to talk to each other, because this Page of Wands is that like fire temper, like the you know what I mean, like, and then you're now in your little like group of temper, and now there's just anxiety and powerlessness, because how could they possibly do that? Well, they were organized enough to overcome you. Why? Because they just did. So now what are you going to do? We're going to fight them. No, we're not going to fight anymore. We're going to figure out who they are, why they're doing that, what's the sickness at play, what is going on here, because this impulse fire and this hungry beast is like, there's always going to be an onslaught of corrections and information and misinformations, and there's always going to be an ability to prop yourself up in whatever given supremacy. Supremacy is I am better than you. Supremacy is also I am worse than you. And if we are operating tribally in supremacy, no matter what the viewpoint is, even if you are absolutely right and everything about what you view is right. It is, but it is wrong for you to think that anyone has to come under the authority of your view without getting there themselves organically. And so facilitating that process is really the answer. But we do so by actually identifying what's going on with this war. What do we do? It's about them. We're so much better. No, it's about wars are going to keep going. We're past this. Let's now think about what we're going to do about dealing with it as a globe. And so the fear of the tribal worldview and the war god and the patriarchy is a one worldview, is a one world order. That's the fear. We're afraid of it too, because the technocrats that are currently like poised to bring something like that into play are the most, spiritually, I see demons, right? The most disgusting. Oh, like the demons that travel with the politicians, like that is absolute like vomit bag, diarrhea swill, right? But the pestilence, the literal pestilence that travels with the technocrats, spiritually speaking, I see these things, that is even grosser. So like, no, we don't feel comfortable abandoning our tribal alliances and our tribal points of view because of just how disgusting those who hold power are. Just because there's a lot that we don't understand about a lot, right? And so as we sort of go into this voyage and we sort of like enter into like this spiritual conversations and we start to work from a spiritual point of view at the level of heart meets heart, we're not going to have a belief battle. My belief in Jesus is none of true and true, blah, blah, blah. And my belief in, atheism, blah, 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 the science, this is the problem. We don't want to do that. We want to start making hot takes on the level of heart, making hot takes on the level of vulnerability, making hot takes on the level of confronting someone with your humanity. Why do you hate me? Okay, let's start the conversation. Let's all be in the conversation together. Is it going to just be a war? Well, Christians and those raised by the war god are trained in warfare. And so all they do is argue for the win. They are not in any way coherent. And this is the biggest problem that we have. And that's not just Christians. This is all fundamentalism does the same thing. You argue for the win. You're debating. You're not having a conflict that creates a strength. It's not a conflict that is creating a relationship. We need technology at the level of conflict resolution, and we need a conflict revolution, because we need to learn how to have conflicts because we have conflicts. And learning how to have conflicts right is going to be what brings us strength. And again, this is a big job. Nothing that is being called for here in the way of like what's going to happen with this war and what are we going to do is small. But with the capacity to reach a global audience, even as tiny as I'm literally like in it, like a little. But this is a message for everybody. You want a psychic to like look at the landscape. The landscape is always going to look like a rancid swill pool of garbage vomit face. Like that's going to be what it's going to look like. When you're channeling the gods and you're saying, well, what can we do about it from this point in time to have the most influence in the unfolding future, we're going to get a very straightforward answer. Look in the mirror. Do you have emotional maturity? You might have emotional intelligence, but do you have emotional maturity? If the answer is no, I hate the people I hate and that's it, then we say, okay, well this is not going to help. This is not going to help. And so we can feed the hungry beast of attention-seeking emoji overusers and constantly be in traffic jams and learning how to like find our spot and try to keep it, and then parallel parking, gotta make the next dollar, or we can say like, this is a change issue. We need to have broad change economically. We need to have broad change in terms of tribes, and countries and how we organize ourselves. We need to have broad change in terms of consensus and lack of a consensus of what war is. Yes, we have war crimes, and these people don't care. They serve a war god. So what are we going to do? We have to look at the spiritual principles at play that are continuing this problem, and it can't be you're stupid and you believe in a horrible god, because that's not winning. You don't win with a war god who trains every single one of its inherents to prepare for an end of the world battle and to have every conversation be a debate and a conquest. No one wins with that. And so as people who are outside of the crisis center of that mental illness, we have to have a calm body and a calm mind and a calm approach to dealing with where the sickness, where the festering wound actually exists, instead of diagnosing it and pointing a finger and being like, we hate you, out to pasture. But it's we're in the same body. We're on the body of, we're a creature that is hosted by the earth, and we are all within her, and we are all on the same body. If we have a diseased organ, we need to get on the same page about what a coherence in an ecosystem looks like. And that is the answer to what the gods want to bring in about this war. What is it going to do? It looks like it'll be quick. It looks like there's a woman coming into power, but over the long haul, in terms of what the blood sacrifice is going to look like, a rising up of the mother's heart in all of us, very tactically, very comprehensively, very coherently, is going to be the solution to solving the problem overall, because what we're looking at even farther out is a full systems collapse with migration and global catastrophe. And we can absolutely avoid that. We can have a smooth sail. We can have an easy peasy. We can have a reorganize. We can have a refacilitate. We can have an innovation. We can have a mitigation. We can have adaptation. And we're going to all survive. We're all going to be fine. But that's actually the course that we have to take. And we have to take the course starting now, because it looks like that battle has begun. So I'm going to leave that here. I love you all. Let's take a moment to just take a couple of breaths and get just a direct, real fast, a couple last words from our gods about how they want to tell us that they love us. We're going to get away from deadline surfer. Try not to respond because you're going to want to. Everything that is put in front of you is going to make you want to go from 0 to 100 rage. Don't do that. That's taking the bait. And then you're buying what's being sold to you, and you're feeding the hungry beast of discord and fractured and insane. We want to get creative about how we bring through our wisdom so that it can reach not just like the audience that agrees with us, but everybody. And that wisdom can be anything. You can paint a picture, you can sing a song. You know, you can pray about it for 2 hours and then write that prayer into some kind of a monologue. Do whatever is going to give you your connection to the divine, and bringing that divine wisdom into a world that is hungry for something other than the same garbage over and over and over again. And try to see where you are and what is safe to connect to. How is it safe to connect? Because we are looking at a situation where there's probably going to be power disruption in terms of like your electricity, and you are going to want to be able to have a conversation with the neighbors that you hate, or at least a strategy of how to deal with them, or at least a way to tell other people where you're at and what it feels like, because we're about to take a leap of faith with this next phase of human development, and we are in the leap of faith period. We're at such a level of collapse writ large that when you try to plan for your future, you really can't. You can't invest properly. You can't properly buy a house. You can't even really properly, find a job that you're going to stick with. Like, we are at a place where even all of the jobs that we've understood as being like the standard are going to disappear. So everyone's looking out, and we're like who is it? Anne Lamott said this. This is where this comes from. We're like a car moving up a highway. I don't know where it comes from, so I just think it's her. We have a car moving up a highway, and there is a headlights, and it's dark, and all you can see is as far as the headlights can show you. That is where we are with this, and our gods know that, and they're telling us like long range, like these tribes were going to fight themselves. Unfortunately, until we decided that we're done with tribes in this way, and we're done with war as they relate to tribes very specifically. And so what would it mean to move into a world without that? That's a leap of faith away from what we know into at least networking and having conversations about what we can bring about in terms of a long-term solution, agreement across the board, standards of living, standards of life, standards of how we are, And so, if you've been blessed to live in a country where they educate you, start talking about it, okay? You get to be first, you get to be the first ones to figure out how to abandon the tribe that has served you so well and hurt, and as you look at those who are in tribes that are served by nothing, you do take some level of responsibility beyond just diagnosing your supremacy. Everyone has to participate. And I know that I sound so mean, but this is how I channel. It's not my fault. Sometimes life stings. If we're going to bypass and just go into altered states of evacuating regular life for spirituality, we're not going to get out of life exactly what we're purposed for a lot of the time. And so sometimes life stings. We're going into a period of time that is going to be very unsteady. It doesn't look like it's going to take forever, because miracle of all miracles, we have some Queen of Swords situation. This might be the Rockville, New York County voting. I don't know. We're going to find out, but that's going to bring some level of civil war. It's okay. We need new leadership. We're hoping that this is what that is. at the same time, we got to look in the mirror. We have to face the fact that we have our own problem with emoji overuser, parallel park pro, emotional intelligence without emotional maturity. I understand our parents had no emotional maturity. It's nobody's fault. But we have to expand our sense of what hearth is, broaden our horizons on home. And the house of love, you shall be loved. This is an act of love for ourselves. This is an act of love for others. And this is a love that transforms. And so with, time for a deep dive, like this is what we have, this is where the work is. Be here now. Let's not flinch. Let's start a different kind of discourse. Let's start a level of discourse at how do I meet the people who hate me if I'm safe enough to speak freely. That's going to be weird and tricky territory. How do we do it artistically? How do we do it without it being war? If they're trained for war and all they can do is, because they're under a spell, they worship a war god, they're under a spell, all they can do is speak from a place of conquest. I'm gonna get your soul for Jesus. They can only argue from a place of, this is my book and I don't deviate from it because I'm a good soldier. They're under a spell. So what do we talk about the spell? Why don't we talk about that? You know what I mean? Spirituality is not just about finding yourself in high vibration. It's about the alchemy, and it's about reading between the lines, and it's about being wise and bringing wisdom and channeling wisdom into situations and finding the sickness and then playing with what it means to communicate to the sickness itself. And so magic works through you. The abundant universe will provide. We are emancipated in our personal lives, and we are emancipated more broadly in our experiencing, in our participating. So begin to participate with this notion that you are purposed for a message related to your life experience and bringing that into the world, the magic that works through you. When you're looking at a crisis and you're feeling hopeless and helpless, where are you? What can you reach? What can you hold? And where can you find your safety if you are under siege, if you're a red dot in a red state? Where can you find your voice if you're not, where can you work with the voices of others if you're not? All of this is creativity. All of this is your creative capacity, your creative potential. And what does it mean to speak to other countries and other tribes and say, this is not just an American problem. It is, because truth be told, I could do a lot with that. We could do a reading on just the United States alone. This is a global problem. This is a war god problem. And if you're not serving the war god with an Abrahamic religion where they're fighting each other, maybe you're serving the war god with an atheistic position of I'm better than you and you need to come under my authority with your beliefs. Maybe you're serving the war god in spirit but not dogma. And so we have to that's where the bomb needs to be disengaged, at that level. And so I'm just going to leave that there. Sending you all love, sending you all hope. Leave questions. Here's what we're going to do. If you have questions, make a list. I will do a TikTok live with the questions, and I will, let's think about when this can happen. Let's do it next week. Okay, so let's do it on, I'll announce it. I think it's going to be Friday or Saturday, but I'll announce it. We can do a TikTok live where I answer questions related to this issue. But this is what we're getting so far. I hope this was helpful, and I am happy to facilitate this kind of stuff. I love you all, and I will see you again soon.